Hello, my friends, and welcome to the next installment of the version 5 overviews. This week, returning as the realm of Mordor. I almost said kingdom, but no, it is just Mordor, Sauron's realm. Now, there are only 3 factions that are going to come after Mordor, that being Rhûn, Rohan, and then the Woodland Realm, because remember, this is being done in alphabetical order. I know there have been some comments desiring certain factions to come next. It's just in alphabetical order. I found that was just the simplest way to do it, so I'm not going all willy-nilly across different factions. So Rhûn will be next week, followed by Rohan in 2 weeks, and then finishing it off with the Woodland Realm in 3 weeks. And I don't anticipate there being any delays in uploads. I've got not much going on in my calendar this month besides like normal work routine, so we should be good to roll. So, what is Mordor in Divide and Conquer? Well, Mordor is of course an orc nation, followers of Melkor. You're a very spam-focused faction in that you recruit a lot of orcs of, I would say, average quality when it comes to the orc nations, maybe lower than average, but you have a lot of them. You have a good amount of heavy armor, you have decent archery options, not great, but decent. You have a lot of beasts, in fact, probably the most amount of beast type units from any other evil faction. You have trolls, you have actually 2 troll varieties, and you have great beasts. You do not have any dedicated cavalry unit that is unique to Mordor, but you are able to recruit cavalry from other evil nations at certain buildings, such as the tribute camp. So you pretty much have a very infantry focused core roster with the beasts, but also a lot of very powerful fear-causing units and some very, very elite options that you have in the later tiers, which are very easy to access. Mordor's higher tier units have very low requirements. Their high tier barracks only needs a level 2 town hall. Their archery range needs like a level 3. It really doesn't take much to get into your late units. So Mordor, very easily able to get access to its whole roster very quick in the campaign. And Mordor is a military powerhouse. You have pretty much nothing but castles except for 1 starting settlement. So everything you see is a castle except for this new settlement, which was added in version 5, one of a few Mordor changes going on. Nazgul is a city, so you at least have 1 non-castle settlement to start with. Other changes from version 5 besides the addition of Nazgul would be that you can now train your temple units, which you would normally only get in Durthang. Those can now be found in key Númenórean settlements. So those are Minas Tirith, Tharvad, Anúminas, Isengard is one of them. You can also get them in Umbar, Dol Amroth, and there's probably like another 1 or 2 that I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but pretty much it'll say it right here in your faction info. At least it should say it in here. It might be in your, I think it's actually in your welcome screen. Oh, here it is. Anúminas, Fornost, Tharbad, Isengard, Amonsul, Dol Amroth, Umbar, and Minas Tirith. So you can get your Númenórean units in those settlements, and not every single settlement in the game, but just those key ones. So those are the main Mordor changes going into version 5. Everything else is just smaller things regarding like maybe the buildings or very, very minor script adjustments, if any. So, going on to your starting regions, well, of course, you have Barad-dûr as your capital, well developed at the start. It does allow you to train your diplomat, reduce your retraining costs in the fortress, I guess it would be, or a citadel. The Ithil Stone will give you a melee weapon bonus for your troops that are trained here, making it very viable to turn Barad-dûr into your, I guess, military recruitment center. Getting +1 melee across all your troops, especially your trash, is quite nice to have. It also comes with a slave pit, Temple of Mordor, barracks, practice range, hunting hut, and roads. So pretty standard capital development here, but the Palantir are very, very nice for orc nations. That melee weapon bonus is huge. Next, other unique settlements, Morannon the Black Gate. Unique building, the Black Gate here, just showing that it gives you a reinforced gate. A little bit of lore text there for you to read through. Towers of the Teeth just give you extra law bonuses. And it comes with a barracks, range, hunting hut, all these other buildings. So nothing too special behind that. I'll just go into the unique buildings. Third thing is also a unique citadel in that this is where you train your temple units from. It's the only place besides those Númenórean settlements where you can get the temple wards, the temple archers, and the temple knights. Minas Morgul and Cirith Ungol are also represented on the Mordor campaign map, with Minas Morgul having the Tower of the Moon, giving you law and free upkeep as well as happiness. So that is a decent bonus to have. Other decent units, or not units, but buildings are pre-constructed, and Cirith Ungol has been made into a fort, giving you a 4-slot extra free upkeep center, but you don't get the additional income that you had. Cirith Ungol was basically moved to Darzgurum to give you an extra city in the east, so that's Tharband, I don't know how you would actually pronounce that. Tharband originally was all of this region, and now it is just around the Sea of Nirn itself, while Darzgurum is in the east. Other settlements, Yerk Estelad used to be a city at some point. It is now a castle, and I think that was a version 4 or 4.5 change. It hasn't been a town in quite some time. Morgost down to the southern end of Barad-dûr, and do note that watchtowers have been added to Mordor around the Tower of Gorgoroth to represent Sauron's Eye. So all of this area up to these ranges have vision that you just have pre-constructed. These watchtowers are meant to represent Sauron's Eye, though it does not extend into the eastern reaches of Mordor. It's perhaps just a little too far away. Of course, Tharband, a castle here. You're not likely to do too much with Tharband. It's very far out. It doesn't get a whole lot of income, but the land is very fertile with all of these swamps here, so there could be some farming economy to be made there. Kargukor, which I don't remember the previous name. This name has changed. It used to be something else. I can't recall what it was. Another castle in your east to protect Barad-dûr, so you have a buffer here from any intrusions from the eastern end, and of course Darzgurum, which is a great trade center. I was talking about your starting armies in Barad-dûr. You do have Leofric the Bowed, along with some orc trash, just a little bit there. At the Black Gate, Burs leads the defense with 3 units of Morannon Guard. At Durthang, you can find Lundush. These are just standard orcs, nothing too special. Yerk Estelad, you have Humgrat at your start. In Cirith Ungol, you do get Grishnok, who is in the books. And I think he's one of the orcs in the film. I think he's the one that he fights with Shagrat in the Tower of Cirith Ungol. He's like the kind of smaller, grimier orc guy that was stationed there. I don't know if he was more goblin-like or orc. I know Shagrat was an Uruk himself, even though technically orc, Uruk, and all that and goblins are basically a colloquial term for the same race. I think I've always liked it more as like goblins are like these scrawny, like messed up, like weakling. There's a bunch of them. They're not very strong. And then you have like your orc, which is like your standard build, and then you have your Uruk, which are like your more beefier guys. But really, Uruk and orc are basically the more or less the same thing until you get to the Uruk-hai, which are specifically the Uruks of Sauron. So you do get Grishnok there, a couple orc archers, and orc host. Gothmog leads the defense at Minas Morgul with orc host, orc scouts, and orc maulers. Over at Morgost, you have Malthak. In Tharband, you do have Gash. And in Darzgurum, you have Arthrog. Finally, in Karkagor, you get Muslone. So that is your starting forces. Do note you do not have all of the Nazgul, nor the Witch King at the beginning of the game. They are locked behind the Nazgul script, so every 10 turns after your first turn, so it'll be on turn 11, 21, 31, 41, you will unlock another Nazgul. These are Gon Altan, Shivus the Desert Sand, what were the other ones? Oops. Sorry, I banged my desk there. I have them here. Balaknar, Zagar, and then eventually the Witch King at turn 51. Do note, if you do check your army tab, you do actually have Sauron at turn 1. However, he is locked in the wastelands here in the northern eastern regions of the map. But if you do want to get a look at his biography, special abilities, and all of that, they are here. Sauron is a very powerful bodyguard. And of course, to use Sauron, you have to recover the One Ring. You will get Sauron in a very large army, which I will have to show shortly on in this video. We'll get to a save where I have Sauron, I have all of the Nazgul, and I can show them all there. And then instead of doing a custom battle, I actually have Sauron with a full army, one of each unit, exclusive to Mordor, and a Gondorian army to fight out in the field. So we get to use Sauron's actual battle model and his actual, their battle abilities that he has. It's quite powerful. So, going into Rebel expansion, you're very limited as you are surrounded by friendly forces around the east, center, and south and north of Mordor. Your only Rebel options would be to take the Castle of Gelebrin out here in the swamps of Daggerlad, or to take Ostathil and move south towards Horondor at Houthonur, and maybe you could get to Tirith right if you rush south. Besides that, Gondor does control the Osgiliath and Caer Andros as they typically do, so you will have to fight Gondor pretty much immediately. But you could play Mordor one of two ways. You could either turtle in Mordor, build up your infrastructure, build up your mines, and you have these two choke points. Gondor is not going to be able to assault you through Minas Morgul or Morannon if you build a hefty enough garrison in these places. So you could either turtle as Mordor, build up strong forces, and then unleash the hordes into Gondor, or you could try to rush Gondor earlier on and occupy the crossings of Caer Andros and East Osgiliath. And if you do rush Minas Tirith, do note that Gondor will get not a last stand army, but they will get a script spawned, very powerful army. That's basically like, Gondor has three last stands. They have one if you take Minas Tirith, they have another when they get really low on settlements. I don't recall the exact value, and then they have like a final one when they're really down to the wall and only have a couple of settlements left. So there are multiple last stands, basically like last minute conscripts. The remaining Gondor volunteers and soldiers and farmhands are all conscripted into the war. So it is doable to rush Minas Tirith, but do note Gondor is going to have a very powerful army that will spawn afterwards. But Minas Tirith is equally a very defensible city, so if you do rush it, it's easy to defend. It's hard to assault though. So if you assault it and maybe Bornevan here is garrisoned in here with a full army, good luck. You're probably not going to win that siege unless you just bring multiple armies of your trash. I mean, even your high tier, like rank and file Uruks can't match Gondor infantry or Gondor archers in combat, especially when we get into the Gondorian elites. You're a little outclassed there, but you do have some very powerful infantry options and beasts and trolls. So you have plenty of ways to get around that, but your core roster is not that strong. They definitely rely on numbers. Beyond that, further expansion, there is the option to go into Rhovanion. You could push northeast to Dorthalu, Osten Arai, maybe take Viltur. So typically, Dol Guldur or Dorwinion or Rune will sweep into these regions, and it's honestly not really worth it to go that direction, as Gondor is your primary threat. Gondor and Rohan are going to be your main enemies. If you really do want to expand out this way, you totally can. I'm not saying you shouldn't, just saying the typical experience is going to be to focus on your main enemy in the west. There's not a lot going on in Rhovanion, unfortunately. These regions aren't particularly wealthy until you get up to Carvarad and Dorwinion, like Rawburg, Lagarth, Viltur. I love the region, it's just not that rich, so I wouldn't advise going that far away as Mordor. But yeah, general campaign strategy, pick if you're going to turtle or rush Gondor or just fight a war here at the rivers. It's really up to you how you play. I'm more of a fan of turtling, getting like some big armies and then unleashing a massive Uruk tide all at once. That's kind of my preference as Mordor, but I don't play them that often. They definitely could use some updates, and maybe they'll get some love in version 6. They are definitely due for that. So I'll go ahead and load a save now where I have pretty much everyone here. I'll just load the Sauron save. I was thinking about loading one up at every 10th turn to show the new characters, but I think it just makes more sense to do it all at once. And here we are at a save where it is now turn 55. I've taken the ring and I have all of the Nazgul and unique generals. And I realized I didn't talk about it earlier on, but I will quickly mention the agents you start with. You do have one spy who starts here by Yerk Estelad or Girth Ungol, and you have the Mouth of Sauron, who is represented as a diplomat, and it's got his little bit of lore there. So a little bit of flavor. He wasn't really a warrior. He is definitely an emissary of Sauron, so he is represented in a perfect role as a diplomat. So we'll go into the Nazgul in no particular order. I'll just start with the two I have up here. First of all, Zagar. Each of them has their own unique biography, and when you click on the Nazgul for the first time, you'll get pretty much a whole pop-up that shows their lore. All of their lore and their names was written by Arcur Galadurathan. So I'm a big fan of it. I do like the little bit of lore there. I'll let you guys explore that on your own time as you unlock the Nazgul and check them out. Some of them are some very well-written stories, in my opinion. Zagar, he has the Temple Marksman as his bodyguard. The next up is Balak Narish Sunfire, and do note they all have the same special ability. Each of them will have Terror of the Nazgul. With 3 charges, has a 45% chance of causing infighting, and permanently reduces enemy morale, which is very, very strong, actually. I don't know if that's permanently for those 30 seconds or if that's just permanently throughout the battle. That's actually worth investigating. I think it's just for those 30 seconds that they have their morale crushed. He has a unit of Temple Wards. The next one here, talk about Leofric the Bowed. You start with, he has a unit of Temple Marksmen. Chibus the Desert Sand has Temple Wards, and Gon Alton also has the Temple Wards. Very, very powerful bodyguards, and the Nazgul are very, very powerful generals. It's insane how powerful they are. I'd honestly like to have a preference of having like one unit for the Nazgul, and just having them be like a 9-unit infantry battalion, or maybe 8 minus the Witch King, and having them be one general. That's just kind of my personal preference, but having each one of these insanely powerful bodyguards, I mean, you can just throw them all into one army, and it's incredibly powerful. The other 3 Nazgul, Kamul the Easterling, and the other 2 of who I forget their name currently, they are given to Dol Guldur, so you cannot get them unless Dol Guldur falls. Should Dol Guldur fall and the Nazgul die, they will return to service for you in Mordor. And one final thing is that should any of these Nazgul generals die, they will respawn in 10 to 15 turns. So there's really no threat if they should ever fall in battle. Throw them in. If they die, big deal. Chances are they won't die in most battles unless you are just massively outnumbered and it's one Nazgul against like a battalion of the Sarnok Axemen, or he gets unluckily hit by artillery. They are very, very powerful generals. Our final of the 9 is the Witch King of Angmar with his unique bodyguard. And don't mind the orc voice lines when you click on these, that's just the limit of the engine. It would be cool if the Nazgul did have their own unique voices when you click on them. The Witch King of Angmar has a different special ability. He has Terror of the Witch King. It's pretty much just a stronger version of the Nazgul Scream. And for his bodyguard, he has the very powerful Temple Knights. So incredible to have a very powerful cavalry bodyguard like this, but he's not even the most overpowered general you have. That title, of course, belongs to Sauron, the strongest unit in the entire game, bar none. I don't even think the Balrog, if it's even still in the files right now, can even match Sauron's power. In fact, the Balrog is, because you can fight him in Khazad-dûm. Sauron's bodyguard, 31 AP attack, 55 defense, 3 hit points each, and Sauron himself has multiple biography traits and retinue that give him just a ton of hit points. Like 5 here, 10 here. He's probably got some from another retinue that he has. He is incredibly powerful, and his special ability is incredibly powerful. It does make your own army have more fatigue, but gives a higher chance to stun the entire enemy army, gives your own troops morale, reduces the enemy morale, and rallies your own troops. It's a very, very powerful army ability that Sauron has there. And when you get him and you bring the ring all the way to Barad-dûr, you will have Sauron with this full army that you see here. So the Black Uruks, a couple of Orc Raider trash thrown in there, Morannon Guard, Orc Maulers, 3 Black Uruk Archers, and you get 2 Olog High and his battalion. So it is an incredibly, incredibly powerful army that you can get there. So if you get Sauron, you're not going to lose a battle as long as he has his presence on the battlefield, which is why I know for a fact when I do the Gondor battle shortly here, I don't think I'm going to lose that one, guys. I think we'll be just okay for that upcoming battle at the end of the video, so you just wait for that. The final things I will talk about as I'm now remembering them, the buildings of Mordor. So for your barracks, you only have 2 tiers. The barracks and the guard barracks, which only requires the level 2 town hall to be built, the slave quarters. The regular barracks will give you Maulers, Morannon Guard, and Orc Host. The guard barracks will give you Maulers, Morannon Guard, Orc Host, Uruk Halberds, Uruks, and Sauron's Will. The range, you have 2 tiers, so it does require the slave hall, which is the tier 3 castle hall structure. The practice range gives you Orc Archers, and their archery range will add the Black Uruk Archers. Next up are the beast cages, which require guard barracks to construct. A level 1 will give you trolls in mountainous regions, and the beast cage will add Olog High and Great Beasts. So Great Beasts, I'm pretty sure, are limited to just the Mordor regions as far as I can recall. They might be available in other regions, but I know for a fact they are mostly just in the Mordor heartland. So do note you cannot build beast cages in Minas Morgul. It is at the Black Gate, Earthing, Barad-dûr. I believe you can get them in Yrk-Estelad and some of these other castles here. But you cannot get the beast cages everywhere. For siege, standard 2-tier artillery ranges. You do get troll catapults, being that you are an orc nation, and for blacksmithing you can go to tier 3. Final unique building of Mordor is the tribute camp, which can be built at the Black Gate and at Barad-dûr, and I think also in Minas Morgul. Tribute camp at tier 1 will give you Sauron Lancers, Sauron Warband, and Marauders, with the Dominion camp adding on Lok Gamp-Rim, Lok Enos-Rim, and the Variag Lancers. So you get a spattering of Easterling, Southron, and Kondish units, basically 2 of each, more or less. And this is your main source of cavalry, so while you cannot train like wargs yourself or have a dedicated Mordor-only cavalry unit besides the Temple Knights, you can get plenty of cavalry through these tribute camps, and it's actually quite generous in the amount that you get. Lastly, I do think if you do take over the Heartlands or take over the homelands of the other evil men nations, I believe you can also recruit their units there, either through another tribute camp or through a barracks. I can't recall 100% if that's the case, but I'm pretty sure you can, just like how Harad can get Kondish units by having Khan taken over. I think the same thing applies for Mordor, but I can't quite recall. If you know for sure, let me know down in the comments below. And finally, the least impressive part of the roster is your is going to be at your castle halls or your castle buildings. You can get Orc Band, Orc Scouts, and Orc Raiders from any meeting hall or any settlement that is a fortress or a castle or like a wooden castle. You'll get it from one of those buildings. So do keep in mind these are some of the worst units in the game. Better than Snaga, but pretty awful, and they are your worst units. But you do get plenty of them everywhere you go. You'll basically have that option to recruit those trash. And having high numbers of trash is just always useful, in my opinion. So I'll now go ahead and bring up the battle, and I will cut to that. So I'll see you guys on the battle map. And welcome to the lands of Mordor, just outside the Black Gate. Here we have a full army of every unit, minus like the regional units that you get from the tribute camp and the troll catapult. But this should be every single core unit to the Mordor roster. And if I did forget something, I apologize. It's happened before, such as the Berserker incident when I did the Isengard video. I don't know how I forgot the Berserkers, but I am like 95% sure I've encompassed everything here today. So, first off, your General's Bodyguard unit. These are the Uruk Bodyguard. They are subtract -1 here because this gentleman actually has 1 experience chevron. They are an 8 attack, 5 charge, 18 defense bodyguard. So you might think those are pretty poor stats, especially for an Orc Bodyguard. It's like Isengard, Uruk-hai Bodyguard are relatively strong. The Snowworks have a very powerful bodyguard. Angmar has a very powerful bodyguard. But the one thing going on for the Uruk Bodyguard is even though they wield these cleavers, they are effective against armor. So these guys are quite armor piercing. Well, not quite, but they are very good against armored units, and they are otherwise just solid bodyguards. Keep them away from getting charged by cavalry. They're not going to win any major battles. They're going to, they're not going to fight elites that well, but it is nice to have a bodyguard with AP, and at 80 soldiers or so, give or take. Typically 77 is what you'll see these guys at. They can do quite a lot of damage output, but they aren't particularly defensive themselves. But in general, a lot of Mordor's roster has typically lower stats, barring a few elite exceptions. And I'm going to go ahead and turn down the speech a little bit and the sound effects there, as I think these guys were speaking quite loud when I got up into their face there. So, going on to the absolute trash tier, I'll start from the left here. These are your Orc Band. Orc Band, 251, so they have tons of orcs in this unit, plenty of meat shields or arrow fodder. Only 1 attack and only 4 defense. Terrible morale response. Absolute garbage. They're bad in... They get a bonus in forests and snow, but a malus in shrubs and barren regions, which is strange because Mordor itself is essentially a barren region. These guys don't even fight well in that, unfortunately for them. Next to them are the Orc Raiders. Orc Raiders, pretty much just the melee equivalent. Same defense, just 1 more attack, but they don't have the bonus against cavalry. They also have a very, very low mass, so if they get charged, pretty much the whole unit is going to die. It doesn't matter. It could be like Rohan Peasant Scouts or Gondor Cavalry Militia. If they get a full frontal charge, essentially the whole unit is as good as dead. Even the Orc Band themselves can't take cavalry charges that well. Even when braced, your best option is either to run away, put them in loose formation, or to try a skill trump defense. That way the cavalry bodyguards can't just push into the whole blob. But in general, yeah, they're not going to do you too well. However, they are meat shields, they are fodder. You can just send them out to tie up the enemy. It takes a while to even just kill units like this with infantry, just because there's so many bodies to get through, and that is their advantage. They are incredibly cheap, like 100 gold or less for upkeep each turn, and available anywhere. So I'd say train plenty of these guys, throw them into battle, let them die, who cares? You can easily replace them, and they are just so cost efficient. They're not going to get many kills themselves, but they'll allow you to navigate your more, I guess, offensive type units in positions where they can get the damage done. They can just stand there. You could friendly fire these guys all you want, firing into blobs of enemies, throw their lives away. They are nothing at all. They are worms, they are maggots. Now into the tier 2, and you're going to notice a common theme between the tier 1, 2, and 3 units in the mainline roster is they really just build up upon the first unit and get slightly better. So what the Orc Band are, the Morannon Guard are the upgrade. So going from 1 and 4 to 3 and 9 with their defenses. They also get the shield wall upgrade, so that allows them to actually function as a proper spear type orc unit. Morannon Guard, just like I said, a better version of Orc Band. They can actually take a charge, especially in shield wall, and they'll be able to do a lot more damage than the Orc Band do. They do have about 23 less orcs in the battalion for those upgrades, but they're not significantly more expensive. They're maybe like 50 or 60 gold more return to upkeep, so if you can recruit them and you're looking for trash, go ahead and pick them up and add them to your front lines. Now, to what the Orc Raiders are, you have the Orc Host. The Orc Host, 228 per battalion again, 4 attack, 8 defense, so getting 2 more attack stats and 4 more to their defensive skill. They don't have shield wall, so they still are vulnerable in that. They're not going to beat Gondor Militia one-on-one. They're actually going to lose that engagement. So there's not really a single Gondor infantry unit that they will beat, except for maybe Archer Militia in melee combat. But still, just another unit that you can swarm the battlefield with. Cheap, okay armor. 4 armor is not terrible for a unit that is that readily available and of that size. Except the Orc Maulers. Now, they don't have a level 1 trash tier, but they are your armor piercing option and your better damage dealer in the early game. 5 attack, that's AP with a 5 charge and 5 defense. Just keep them away from archers. Archers will absolutely wreck them. Lebanon Marines or Lebanon Guardsmen with the javelins will absolutely destroy Orc Maulers. And they don't particularly like to get cavalry charged either. But if they do countercharge a cavalry unit, some of them will get their charge attack off. And these are huge axes. They're going to do some gnarly damage with these. I've always loved just how oversized their weapons are. It's absolutely insane. Like, look at the size. Look at the size of that axe head. I don't even know if that's wieldy. I feel like you couldn't use that. Like, this whole bottom option is just so excessive right here, but I kind of love it. I kind of love their design. Going into the next tier, the Black Uruks and the Morgul Chosen. So what the Morannon Guard are to the Orc Band, the Morgul Chosen are to the Morannon Guard. A significant upgrade, 5 attack. Well, that isn't much of an upgrade. That's only 2 more attack points, 4 charge, but 20 defense, shield wall, good morale. This is where you actually see decent morale in your tier. The Morgul Chosen actually can hold the line for you, and they are arguably your best anvil unit for your infantry tier. Them and the other Black Uruk units we're going to get to, but if you just need something to hold the line, protect you from cavalry, Morgul Chosen they would be your best option. I'd recommend even taking Morgul Chosen. If you're going to fight Rohan a lot, just build a bunch of Morgul Chosen, or even the Morannon Guard, and you'll be just okay against Rohan. Against Gondor, though, I would focus more into the Orc Host, and our next units being the Black Uruks. This is your bread and butter, quote-unquote elite. It's really your tier 3. For any other faction, it's like a tier 2 unit, maybe a tier 3 unit for some other orcs, probably a tier 2 for most other nations. 8 attack, 4 charge, 16 defense, so solid stats there. You're basically just a weaker Gondor infantry at that point, but you do have more orcs per battalion, like 20 more than you would have than in a Gondor infantry battalion. And again, good morale, impetuous morale response. Don't have shield wall. You don't really see shield wall for your infantry units outside of your spears as Mordor. You don't have like a good shield wall option for your dedicated melee infantry. So that is one weakness of Mordor's infantry roster. The Black Orcs just cheap. They're probably like 250 upkeep a turn, not too expensive to recruit. And they only take 2 turns to recruit as well. So if you want a better infantry unit, then, well, these guys, you have plenty of availability to spam out Black Orcs. And if you fight Mordor in the campaign, you're going to be fighting a lot of these guys. They can just dish out so many of them, equip thousands of orcs per turn, and send them out into the battlefield. So it's a common, very common unit, but they are still not altogether that strong. Our last unit in this tier are the Black Orc Halberds, similar to the Black Orc Infantry, 5 attack instead of 8, 13 defense, but they are spears, they are halberds, so they have that armor-piercing bonus, so that makes them quite strong, and they have an interesting polearm. Some have just spears, some of these curved, like, almost like Naginata blade ends, some have, like, crude axe heads, so I'm honestly, I'd question even calling these halberds. It's very much just a weird, freaky polearm. Like, I don't even know what the heck this is. This is some type of, like, moon cleaver halberd weapon. I don't even know what that is. But they function like halberds, so use them. It's really strong if you can overlap them with your infantry like this and have a combined arms approach. They can complement each other very effectively there. So next of all, we'll go into the Sauron's Will. These are basically your upgrade to the Orc Maulers. Sauron's Will, 10 attack, 7 charge, and 17 total defense. They roll giant clubs and giant cleavers, and wow, the orcs are noisy. I'm hoping the sound settings aren't too obnoxious in this video recording. I'm just gonna hope for the best here, guys. So Sauron's Will, they also inspire your own troops. So instead of you having something like Uruk Taskmasters like the orcs or the goblins of Moria have, you have Sauron's Will. They also frighten enemy infantry, so they are a morale supporter and a morale debuffer, and they also are effective against armor. So a very good shock infantry unit. You'll probably be using quite a few of these guys, especially because Gondor does employ a lot of armored infantry. Sauron's Will aren't going to have too much of a problem cutting through Gondor infantry and Gondor spearmen. Even some of their more elite units like Citadel Guard, the Sauron's Will be able to dish out some damage, though I don't anticipate them winning a combat against Citadel Guard. Those guys have like 30 defense. Or is it Warden to the White Tower, what I'm thinking of, the sword version. But still, they're a good option for armor piercing. You can use like Orc Trash to basically work as the anvil, tie up an enemy elite unit, and then throw the Sauron's Will into the back, and watch them do tons of shock damage. They are going to be your dedicated damage dealer infantry. Up next, we'll talk about the Temple Wards. Again, these guys are only available in certain Numenorian settlements or Durthing, or some of your Nazgul have it here. Temple Wards, discount the chevrons, they actually have a base of 16 attack, 8 charge, and 28 defense. Similar to the Sauron's Will, they inspire and frighten, so they have that very powerful morale bonus to them. And they are locked, so the temple units do fight to the death. Every single one of them will go down until a sword wound collapses him and his body can no longer fight. 129 men per battalion, or I should say Dark Numenorians per battalion. They are incredibly powerful and pretty much your best infantry unit outside of Sauron himself, but for the ones that you can train everywhere, Temple Wards, very, very powerful. Throw one of these into your army and it just becomes significantly stronger. It'll keep your orcs fighting till the bitter end. So we're going to talk about, do I want to do Sauron next to the trolls? We'll do Sauron next. We'll finish the infantry. Sauron, of course, you only get one of him. He is the one and only. This is the strongest bodyguard in the game, except for the Oathbreakers. I have to actually make that disclaimer. Oathbreakers are stronger. Oathbreakers would beat Sauron. It's not even a question. It's actually kind of ridiculous. But Sauron, oh, why can we not see your stats? It's because of his, you know, I'm just going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to pause. We can actually see his stats here. 31 attack, that is armor piercing, 12 charge, 55 defense, with 30 of that being armor, 10 of that being shield, so he's very resistant to arrows, and 15 defensive skill. He is also good against mounts, and Sauron's bodyguard is relentless, so these guys will not get stunned, they cannot get staggered, they are just forever on the attack. and there is Sauron himself, standing just a bit taller than the others and his bodyguard. He's an absolute beast, and it is pretty much impossible for him to die in combat. You'd have to be basically sending him alone against probably tens of thousands of troops that are all armor-piercing and elite units, like maybe 10,000 Lasarnic Axemen that all get a chance to wail on him. They might kill Sauron, but he will probably kill all of them at the same time. He is just incredibly, incredibly powerful, and he's meant to be. I mean, he is the Dark Lord, so he should be just ridiculously powerful. So that is Sauron's bodyguard. Next, we'll talk about the 2 troll units. Now, I mean, I've talked about trolls before. I've talked about them in numerous other videos. This is your basic troll. 38 attack, 10 charge, 30 defense. Best used against enemy elite cavalry, or just cavalry in general, or as a line breaker. They will absolutely wreck pike formations, shield wall formations, infantry formations. They will clear a path for your orc trash to then run in, because when they run into enemy infantry and they send them flying, and those infantry have to get up, that whole time the enemy infantry aren't able to attack, so you can rush in your own armor-piercing units or your own infantry, whatever it is. They can get in and start wailing on the downed enemy that the trolls have just knocked over. But do keep in mind the trolls will do that to your own troops as well, so they can knock up your own orcs and send them flying. So it's great to send the trolls in first and then immediately follow up with your own infantry right after and just clean up the results. Very powerful units. I love trolls in this engine. In Medieval 2, I just think they're neat. I love trolls in Medieval 2. Next off, the Olog-hai, the most powerful troll in the mod. Olog-hai have 45 attack, 14 charge, and 38 defense, so significantly stronger than the regular trolls. Same base effects there. It does say their movement speed is 80%, but that is misleading. They have big models. They move very fast on the battlefield. Do note, trolls do not have armor piercing. They don't need it. They have 45 attack, so armor piercing is irrelevant. They are incredibly strong. And there is the argument to be made that says they should be AP. And if you do that, I would say you just lower their base attack, but they really don't need it with those attack stats. It's insane the damage that the Olog-hai can do. They are very hard to kill, and anytime I fight Mordor, I am deathly afraid of the damage the Olog-hai are able to output. So that is it for the infantry and the trolls. Next up, the archers. So at tier 1, you do have the orc scouts. This is your trash tier. 2 melee, 2 missile, and 3 defense. They're very, very bad. Poor accuracy, abysmal accuracy. You don't see that. Like, you really don't see that on many units, but they are actually abysmal. Low range, 140 meters, and only 16 missiles. Again, they are archers. Archers in high volumes of fire can do damage, but the orc scouts, they're not gonna do too much for you. They're just awful. try to use the upgrade if you can, which we'll talk about now. The orc archers, 3 attack, 3 missile, 3 charge, and 6 defense. These are the equivalent of Gondor's archer militia, but with even worse accuracy. Low 22 missiles, 160 meter range. They are nothing special, but they are going to be a bit better than the orc scouts. If you go by missile damage, you can take the orc scouts, 228, multiply that by their damage is 2, so they're doing like 450 possible missile damage per volley if every shot hits. These guys at 178 times 3 is like 510 missile damage per volley, but they're also going to be more accurate, so they're going to land more shots than the orc scouts. So you're going to get higher DPS from the orc archers than you will the orc scouts, even though the orc scouts have like 50 more soldiers per battalion, and you get that higher ammo cap. So definitely worth upgrading to the orc archers. And finally, if you can, get the black orc archers, 5 melee, 5 missile attack with average accuracy, more range, more missiles, 12 defense, 8 of that being armor, so they're quite resilient. And they can actually counter-skirmish very well against things like Gondor Archer, the Athelian Rangers, Rohirrim Archers. They're actually decently resistant to that, but their low accuracy means they're not going to output tons of damage, but they're going to do more so than the other 2 in this grouping. So it's pretty much just every time. If you can get the upgrade, get the upgrade. Like, try not... If you have the resources and you have a ton of archery ranges, just make orc archers. Don't make scouts. And if you have the level 2 archery ranges, make the black orc archers. Don't make the orc archers. They're not even that much more expensive than the preceding tier. Finally, the Temple Marksman, the Nazgul variant, the variant only available in certain Numenorean settlements. They have less melee attack than the Temple Wards. They have a base of 11 because you got to discount the experience that this Nazgul has. 7 missile attack, 22 defense with 17 of that being armor. They do rely entirely on their armor. Their defense skill is actually quite low for this unit. It's just the heavy armor that they wear. You know, this is your stake placing unit, so they can put down stakes, which is very nice, especially against Rohan. Locked morale, just like the others. 180 meter range, so same as the Black Uruk archers. And do notice it does say they have armor-piercing missiles, so the Temple Marksmen do use steel bows. That 7 missile is very, very strong, given that armor-piercing missile description that they have there. So they're going to do a lot of damage. They are quite deadly. While being not as strong in melee, they are absolute monsters at archery. So while archery in general isn't a strength of Mordor, Temple Marksmen definitely make up for that weakness and definitely give Mordor, I would say, average to strong archery just based on this one unit alone. If it was just these 3, I'd be like, yeah, Mordor has terrible archers. Like, they're just bad. But you throw on the Temple Marksmen and that instantly raises the bar. So finally into our cavalry units, and of that there were only 2. First of all, the Temple Knights, the Witch King's bodyguard. Temple Knights discount the experience. They have 12 base attack, 8 charge, 29 total defense with actual defense skills. So 17 armor, 12 defense skill, no shields, so they are vulnerable to javelins. They are vulnerable to crossbows, but you're not going to run into that. Your only real javelin threat with these guys is either Lebanon guardsmen or Arid skirmishers from Rohan. For the most part, besides that, you're not going to run into armor-piercing missiles that are going to be a threat to you unless you get very late in the campaign. Maybe you're fighting, like, if you manage to fight Arid Luin, be careful of their broadbeam marksmen. Those crossbows are going to wreck the Temple Knights, but there's not many crossbows to fight if you're playing as Mordor. They also are locked morale, just like the others. They are just ridiculously powerful. And lastly, while not so much of a cavalry unit, but they are labeled as such, the Great Beasts. I'm a big fan of these guys. I have a big soft spot for rhinos. When you give me a giant, monstrous rhino unit, I love it even more. The only thing I find gross about these guys are the tribal orcs that are on their backs. I think they're a little gross. They have a 40 melee attack, 9 missile with the javelins that are armor piercing, 12 charge, and 28 defense. Notice they actually have a lot of ammo. They put a lot of javelins on this battalion, or like on the howdah that they have on their backs. 15 missiles, average accuracy, 75 meter range, unwavering morale. Their only real weakness is that they can run amok if a lot of them die or any other fear effects hit them, but they are quite powerful. In melee, they will do a ton of damage. They're like mini Mumakil, and the javelins can do a lot as well. And these guys are readily available as Mordor. Definitely a highlight of the roster. So as we can see here, we have the Gondorian army adjacent to us on the other side of the field. I believe this general is Istion that we are fighting, not the Swan Knight one, just a regular general's bodyguard here. They have brought a ballista, they have brought some Gondor infantry, territorial guardsmen, militia. It's actually a very heavy militia army, so they are going to get certainly crushed. So we're just going to move our army down the hill now. I'll keep full control of it here. I won't mess around with this battle. We're not going to have any issues. We're going to rush the Orc Raiders into combat. We're going to send our initial Orc bodyguard out there. We're going to look at the damage that we can do here. I think we'll send Temple Knights into the Cavalry Militia. I think we're almost in range of the archers here, so we'll start to send fire onto these Gondor Militia. Now, if armor-piercing archers, we probably want to hit those Lebanon guardsmen here. Here comes the initial ranges. Volleys coming in. Look at the sheer amount of missiles that we're able to output as the dust clouds rise up amongst the fields of Mordor here. Temple Marksmen doing a lot of damage here to the Lebanon guardsmen. Orc bodyguards in melee. Send the Orc maulers up, get the host in there. We can definitely bide our time. We are in melee with the Gondor Cavalry Militia. They are not long for this world. I think it's time that we send in the Great Beasts. Just go full send into combat here. Black Uruk Halberds, let's try to stop the Gondor Cavalry Militia. And let's try to run Sauron into combat, shall we? We're gonna get side charged here by the cavalry militia. That is okay. They can take some damage. Here come the great beasts charging into Lemon clansmen, knocking them up everywhere. Oh, and that is a lot of damage. That was a ton of damage on the charge. The entire time they weren't on fire at will, which is unfortunate. But as they go into melee and use their horn attacks, they're going to clear multiple men at once. Big key with the great beasts is you want to keep them moving. Look at the javelins coming in on the ballistic crew, doing a lot of damage there. Another charge into the back lines of the Gondor infantry. Send the Templar marksmen to shoot at them. Where is Sauron? Let's get him into melee, shall we? Orcos waiting in standby. A few Temple Wards back here. Wait, are we getting flanked? We are getting flanked. Forgot about the backup army that they have. We do have a few trolls. Let's send those trolls into the Lemon clansmen. Here they go, right into the macemen. Now these guys are armor piercing, so they might be able to do some serious damage to the trolls. But look at how many died on the charge there. We got a good dozen or so kills. We use our ability, Witch King's morale debuff, Terror of the Witch King, very powerful. I'm content just to leave him in. And here is Sauron's bodyguard. We've yet to lose a great beast, which is great. They are still fighting and knocking down Gondor militia here. Like some of the units are still being stun locked. We're going to use Terror of the Nazgul and really just build up the debuff here. Look at this. Gondor infantry shaken. They're right next to Captain's bodyguard. But if we use Wrath of Sauron, there they go. They are all fleeing now. That is the power of stacking these abilities. The entire enemy force is now fleeing because of that ability. That is how strong the terror stacking is that Gondor has access to. We even have one more. Let's use that too, shall we? Look at that. The whole army is just fleeing in terror. I think even their captain's bodyguard has had enough. They might not even return to combat here. That just might be it. The only unit that is still fighting right now are the Wardens of the White Tower, who have locked morale, but they're getting absolutely annihilated by the armor-piercing arrows of the Temple Marksmen. If you have all your Nazgul in one army and you have Sauron, you're going to be able to rout pretty much anything. It is insane, the damage that you can do. We're going to cool back. We're going to see if they even attempt to return to the battlefield. I kind of doubt it. In fact, I almost certainly doubt it. Let's send over the Olog High. Look at all of the bodies here. This was definitely my best battle in terms of army forces. I should have, in hindsight, you know, it probably would have been good to give Gondor a proper army. Oh, and I love this. I have permanent arrows turned on, and you can see all of them here where all of our archers were firing. I love that effect. It just makes the battlefield look so much more realistic. We really only lost our trash in these battles. Great beasts running amok in the territorial guardsmen. I don't even care about the friendly fire. Looks like some Gondor militia have come back, but look at that. The enemy army is not returning at all. I don't think their captain's bodyguard is still running for the hills. I don't even have a unit chasing them. It's just the permanent debuff that they have faced. They will not come back. Great beasts and trolls here finishing off the Gondor militia. We didn't get to see Sauron do all too much, but he is here in combat now, alongside Great Beasts. And I don't even think the Great Beasts can knock up Sauron's bodyguard. I don't think they can do that. Here they go into Wardens of the White Tower. Every hit is just going to slay these very, very elite Wardens. I mean, they are 1329 for stats, but they don't have any hope against what they're fighting right now. Almost every attack that comes from Sauron's bodyguard is going to slay one of these Wardens. Almost every hit from Olog High is going to do the same. Oh, that definitely shows the power. That definitely was a permanent morale debuff. These soldiers with their general are still fleeing away. And this wasn't like a terrible general. I bet even if this was Denethor or Boromir, I'm sure the same thing would happen. They just would not be able to keep their army fighting here. So that is the power of Mordor's generals. So while it's weird to say this, in general, in summary, Mordor's roster is a lot of trash supplemented by some very powerful individual units, such as like the Trolls, the Olog High, the Temple units, and the Great Beasts. But their real strength is in their characters. It is in their Nazgul, and it is in Sauron. These bodyguards are so incredibly strong. The army abilities they have are incredibly powerful, and the ability they have to essentially make the men of the West lose all of their hope. I don't think any other faction can basically use morale to their, to their strength as much as Mordor can. Mordor is certainly able to debuff morale more so than any other faction. The only other ones I can think of would be like the goblins with poisoned arrows and fear-causing units, but Mordor, with their army abilities, is able to do just so much more. There goes Captain Telefinmen of the reinforcements. Mordor is able just to really abuse the fear mechanic, and if they had poison archers too, yeah, that would definitely be it. They would be completely, like, they are uncontested when it comes to morale, and it's just the strength of the Nazgul and their bodyguards, because not only, my final thoughts is this, not only do the Nazgul abilities cause fear, cause infighting, but also the bodyguard itself frightens nearby enemy infantry, so that is just so incredibly powerful. So with that, I have shown the might of Mordor. They are very powerful in the hands of the player. And until next week, my friends, when we re-meet with the Easterlings of Rune, I bid thee all farewell.